What if the first circle ever drawn was not art, but a secret of eternity? What if the serpent that devours itself is not a monster, but a message? And what if creation itself is a loop, where endings and beginnings share the same breath? The ancients knew. They carved its form into temples, traced it on papyrus, whispered its name in initiation halls. Ouroboros, the serpent that swallows its own tail, became the silent answer to the question of existence itself. The Ouroboros stands as one of humanity's oldest surviving ideas. Its image, a serpent biting its tail, appears across continents, older than alphabets, older than nations. To the modern eye, it is strange, but to the ancient mind, it was revelation, a mirror of the cosmos devouring and birthing itself endlessly. You must understand, it is not merely a creature, but a cycle, a symbol of the universe's hunger for renewal, of death nourishing life, of creation feeding on destruction. Across millennia, it whispered the same truth. Nothing ends. Everything transforms. From Egypt to Greece, from alchemy to modern physics, its circle of scales mirrored every law of matter and spirit. The Ouroboros lives at the heart of myth because it is also the shape of thought itself, turning, questioning, consuming, rebirthing. What many don't see is that this is not mythology, but metaphysics disguised in art. To the Egyptians, the Ouroboros was not a snake, but a force, the encircling body of Ra, protecting the sun's nightly voyage through the underworld. Within the serpent's coiled frame, time itself was born. It enclosed the world like a cosmic womb, defining both chaos and order. Through its endless curve, they believed the gods renewed creation each dawn. Every sunrise was the serpent's mouth, releasing the light it had devoured the night before. You must understand, this was not symbolism for them. It was reality. The serpent was life feeding on itself. Its coils formed the celestial boundary between what exists and what waits beyond. Its motion defined the rhythm of breath, of seasons, of death's return as seed. To trace its circle was to imitate the divine act of rebirth. In Greece, this same vision re-emerged, reborn as philosophy. The alchemists later called it the one thing, the all, the cycle of the great work. They saw in the serpent's loop a diagram of consciousness, mind folding upon itself, self realizing self. Through it, they declared that the beginning and the end are the same point seen from different directions. It was not religion, but realization. Ouroboros became the invisible skeleton of all transformation myths, every phoenix rising from ash, every seed sprouting from decay, every sun reborn at dawn. They are fragments of the same circle. What many don't see is that this serpent's curve is not just drawn on walls, but written into the laws of energy and entropy. As civilizations rose and fell, they carried the serpent with them. In Nordic runes, it curled around the world as Jormungandr, the sea serpent that held the oceans in place. In Indian Vedic thought, it lived as the cosmic serpent, Ananta, endless, upon whom Vishnu rested. Each culture gave it a new name, but none could escape its truth. Existence devours itself to stay alive. The Ouroboros is not worship, it is awareness. It tells us that perfection is not linear progress, but circular return. To see its form is to see time, not as a line, but as a spiral, forever ascending, yet eternally returning. It is the pulse of stars, the breath of gods, the echo of one truth, repeating through infinity. And yet, what lies hidden in its motion is a question humanity still cannot answer. If creation eats itself, who is the eater, and who is the eaten? The trail of the Ouroboros begins in Egypt, the land where symbols were born, before words could speak. Beneath the golden dust of ancient tombs, archaeologists discovered its first image, drawn upon the walls of the shrine of Tutankhamun. A serpent circles the sun god Ra, tail in mouth, coiling around both the sky and the underworld. It was called Mehen, the protector, the boundary between creation and chaos. You must understand, to the Egyptians, this was not myth, it was cosmology. The serpent's circle marked the limits of existence, separating the eternal from the unformed void. This early Ouroboros guarded the sun's nightly journey through darkness. Each evening, as Ra descended into the underworld, Mehen coiled tightly to shield the divine light from demons and shadowed forces. At dawn, the serpent released its tail, allowing light to emerge anew. The Egyptians saw this act as the essence of immortality, life born from its own death. Through this ritual of celestial self-consumption, the universe sustained itself. What many don't see is that this was the first scientific model of eternity ever drawn by human hands. Over time, the serpent's image left the tombs and entered the temples. It encircled the god Atum, the self-created one who emerged from the waters of chaos to form the world. The Ouroboros thus became the diagram of divine self-generation, the god who births himself, the cosmos that renews itself. Its shape, perfect and unbroken, symbolized the eternal cycle where creation and destruction are one continuous act. To gaze upon it was to contemplate infinity. When this wisdom flowed northward into Greece, it met philosophy. The Greeks, with their hunger for logic, translated Egyptian symbolism into metaphysical language. They saw in the Ouroboros not only a cosmic truth, but a mental one, the unity of opposites, the paradox that all dualities dissolve when viewed from eternity. Heraclitus, the dark philosopher, spoke of the same fire that both creates and destroys, a circle consuming itself in order to endure. The serpent became a thought, a line of reasoning that devours its own tail to reveal understanding. In Greek alchemical manuscripts, the Ouroboros began to carry new inscriptions. Around its coiled body were the words, "Hen to Pan," the all is one. This was no mere motto. It was the formula of existence, the understanding that every particle of matter and every spark of spirit are reflections of one eternal substance. What many don't see is that alchemy was never about gold. It was about turning the base matter of human perception into pure awareness. The serpent was the teacher, showing how self-reflection creates transformation. From Greece, this idea slithered silently into Gnostic and Hermetic traditions. The serpent became the whisperer of hidden truth, the symbol of wisdom denied to the unprepared. In Hermetic philosophy, the Ouroboros represented the cosmos itself, both the prison and the key, the illusion and the awakening. To understand it was to see the divine pattern that repeats in stars and souls alike. Even the early Christians, though they feared the serpent's form, could not escape its logic. The Book of Revelation describes the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, as one. Beneath that vision hides the same circular law, rephrased in sacred language. The Ouroboros had simply changed its skin, hiding within theology what it once shouted in myth. As centuries passed, mystics and scholars copied its image across Europe, sometimes mistaking it for a pagan relic, sometimes venerating it as divine geometry. But the circle endured because truth endures. Every age repainted it in its own language. The medieval alchemists placed it within circles of fire and water, symbols of transformation. The serpent devouring itself became the crucible of creation, the secret of how spirit refines through destruction. You must understand, this was not superstition, but observation. The ancients saw that every seed must decay to sprout, every star must collapse to shine anew. The Ouroboros was the shape of natural law, written in divine handwriting. What many don't see is that its endless return was not despair, but promise, that in every ending hides the seed of renewal. And thus the serpent slithered into eternity, not as an idol, but as an idea. Its form marked the union of opposites, the balance of all forces, the eternal truth that nothing dies. It only changes its face. Hidden within the dimly lit laboratories of medieval alchemists, the Ouroboros found its second birth. There, among glass vessels, mercury fumes, and sacred diagrams, the serpent was not merely drawn, it was invoked. To the alchemist, it represented the grand cycle of transformation, where matter, mind, and soul dissolve and reunite in endless alchemy. You must understand, this was not chemistry, but theology disguised in symbols. The serpent devouring its tail was the philosopher's equation of self-reflection, where the seeker must consume his former self to awaken the eternal one within. The Ouroboros became the emblem of the magnum opus, the great work. Around the serpent's loop, alchemists wrote the Latin phrase, "In principio et in fine est idem." In the beginning and in the end, there is the same. Every phase of alchemy mirrored this law. Nigredo, the blackness of death; albedo, the whitening of purification; rubedo, the reddening of enlightenment. Within these transformations, the serpent's cycle repeated endlessly. What many don't see is that alchemy was never about transmuting metals, but about turning consciousness from lead into light. In Hermetic writings, the Ouroboros is described as the infinite spirit that both contains and is contained. It represents the first matter, the unbroken unity from which all opposites arise. Hermetic philosophy, which merged Egyptian and Greek wisdom, treated this symbol as divine proof that creation is self-sustaining. As above, so below, they said. The serpent swallowing itself was the image of heaven reflected in earth, the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm. The alchemist's task was to recognize the circle and step consciously within it. The occultists of later centuries called it the seal of eternity. In secret texts and grimoires, the serpent surrounded sigils and pentagrams, marking the boundary between the spiritual and material realms. To them, it was a guardian, an invisible circle protecting sacred knowledge. When drawn correctly, it was believed to create a sanctum of infinite reflection, where time folded upon itself. The practitioner inside that circle was said to feel the breath of eternity moving through his veins. The Ouroboros also appeared in Kabbalistic mysticism, wrapped around the tree of life, symbolizing the endless cycle of divine emanation. From the infinite source, light flows downward into form, and through the serpent's return, the form ascends back into light. It is a map of creation breathing in and out. You must understand, this was not mystic poetry, but geometry, the divine architecture that connects existence to its source. In Gnostic thought, the serpent's self-devouring motion represented gnosis itself, the moment the soul realizes it has been both seeker and sought all along. To know God, the Gnostics said, one must consume illusion as the serpent consumes its tail. Enlightenment was not found by escape, but by return. The Ouroboros was the guide, showing how the soul reclaims its lost divinity through the spiral of awareness. Occult philosophy saw in the serpent the perfect symbol of paradox. It is both creator and destroyer, alpha and omega, healer and poisoner. In this paradox, wisdom hides, for life without death is stagnation, and creation without decay is impossible. The serpent devours itself not in hunger, but in harmony. It completes the circle to remind the universe that perfection is motion, not stillness. Artists of the Renaissance, drawn to secret symbolism, placed the Ouroboros discreetly in their works. It wound around hourglasses, cradled globes, or encircled cherubic faces. These were not ornaments, but codes, a whisper that eternity coils within every moment. The learned few recognized it instantly, the seal of unity, the loop of time, the secret geometry of being. What many don't see is that every occult system, every mystical path, circles back to this serpent. Whether clothed in Egyptian myth, Greek philosophy, or Christian mysticism, it tells the same truth. The path to eternity is not forward, but inward, back through oneself. The Ouroboros consumes its form to free its essence, just as the soul must surrender identity to discover infinity. And in this act, the serpent becomes the teacher of all transformation, whispering silently to those who dare to look within its endless curve. To become whole, you must first return to the beginning. Across continents and ages, the serpent's circle reappeared under countless names. Each civilization reshaped it, yet none could change its essence. You must understand, the Ouroboros is not a cultural invention. It is an archetype. It rises from the collective memory of humankind, a pattern that re-emerges whenever consciousness gazes deeply enough into its own origin. In the myths of Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, India, and the North, the serpent returns, always encircling, always renewing, always devouring the illusion of separation. In the pagan world, serpents were sacred long before temples were built. In the forests of ancient Europe, Druids spoke of the coiled serpent as the pulse of the earth, the unseen current that binds stone and star. They carved spirals into standing stones to mirror its motion. These spirals were not art. They were maps of life's return, markers of the seasons of soul and soil alike. The Ouroboros, though unnamed, lived within their sacred geometry. Its motion guided rituals of death and planting, mirroring how all things rise only by falling first. Farther east, in the lands of India, the Ouroboros took the form of Ananta Shesha, the endless serpent upon which the god Vishnu rests between creations. Coiled in infinite loops, Ananta sustains the universe upon his body. When Vishnu dreams, the worlds appear. When he awakens, they dissolve back into the serpent's endless body. What many don't see is that this story mirrors the Egyptian vision perfectly. The divine asleep within itself, creation born from its own eternal slumber. In Norse myth, the serpent resurfaces as Jörmungandr, the world serpent, child of Loki. Cast into the ocean, it grew so large that it encircled the earth, tail locked in jaws. The gods feared it, for they knew that when Jörmungandr releases its tail, the end will come. The sea will boil, the sky will shatter, and the world will be remade. Yet even here, the myth speaks of renewal, not destruction. Ragnarok, the Norse apocalypse, is not death. It is the serpent uncoiling so that creation can begin again. In the ancient Americas, the serpent danced as Quetzalcoatl, the feathered dragon of wisdom. Though his form was winged, his nature was the same, the link between heaven and earth, light and shadow, creation and dissolution. The Aztecs called him the bringer of dawn, the one who dies each evening and is reborn with the sun. His cycle, like that of the Ouroboros, told the eternal story of the cosmos feeding itself with its own light. The Celts believed serpents carried knowledge of the underworld. Their coiling motion beneath the earth's surface symbolized hidden wisdom, energy unseen yet always present. Their spiral carvings, found on the stones of Newgrange, Ireland, predate written language but echo the same cosmic loop. The ancients may not have drawn the Ouroboros biting its tail, yet they felt it, alive beneath their feet, coiling within their rituals, whispering that death is but a doorway folded within life. Among African and indigenous cosmologies, circular serpents appeared as guardians of balance. The Dogon people of Mali spoke of Nomo, the serpentine being who descended from the stars, teaching creation through cycles of water and breath. Even in Australia, the rainbow serpent slithered through dreamtime myths, shaping rivers and mountains, marking the eternal flow between form and formlessness. The pattern persists, unbroken by geography or language. You must understand, the Ouroboros is humanity's universal symbol for the law of return. It is not pagan, not religious, not scientific. It is elemental. Wherever humans looked deeply enough into fire, water, or dream, they found the circle reflecting back. Its presence in every culture proves that the mind, when confronted with mystery, turns inward until it sees itself consuming itself, becoming whole again. What many don't see is that these pagan and pre-Christian serpents were never worshipped as deities, but honored as living metaphors. They reminded the people that even the gods die and rise again, that time devours its children only to birth them once more. The Ouroboros, beneath every myth, was the signature of life itself, a truth so vast that it required endless retelling in endless forms. Thus, from the Nile to the Ganges, from the fjords to the Andes, the serpent encircled the world in its silent embrace. It was both cradle and grave, both womb and tomb, a circle of being too vast for one name to contain. And though civilizations perished, their serpents still coiled beneath the sands and stones, waiting for those who remember to see the pattern once more. As the ancient world gave birth to philosophy and faith, the Ouroboros slipped quietly into new sanctuaries. Its body of symbols shed old skins, yet never changed its essence. You must understand, when empires rise, they do not destroy old gods, they absorb them. And so, the Serpent of Eternity found itself reborn within temples of logic, cloisters of mysticism, and monasteries of revelation. Its meaning evolved, yet its truth remained the same, that all creation feeds on its own reflection. In the secret halls of agnosticism, the Ouroboros became a symbol of divine imprisonment and liberation. The Gnostics believed that the world was not perfect, but a shadow of higher realms. Around this material cosmos, they imagined a serpent, coiled in endless rotation, trapping souls within cycles of birth and death. But within that same circle lay the key to escape: knowledge, gnosis. For when one realizes the circle's nature, when one sees that the serpent is also the self, the cycle breaks and the soul awakens beyond matter. The Ouroboros, to the Gnostic, was both jailer and liberator. In Hermetic philosophy, the serpent gained new depth. The texts of Hermes Trismegistus described the universe as a divine mirror, each level reflecting the one above. The Ouroboros represented the unity of all opposites, light and shadow, good and evil, heaven and earth. It was the border and the bridge between all realities. The Hermetic sages taught that wisdom lies not in choosing sides, but in understanding the circle that binds them. As above, so below, as within, so without, they wrote, tracing the serpent's curve in air as they spoke. What many don't see is that this simple phrase is the serpent's whisper itself. When early Christian thinkers encountered Hermetic and Gnostic ideas, they absorbed fragments of the serpent's truth, but veiled them in theological metaphor. In the book of Revelation, Christ declares, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. This proclamation mirrors the Ouroboros perfectly, the divine speaking through time's loop, proclaiming that all beginnings are merely disguised conclusions. The serpent had vanished in form, but survived in word. The infinite had merely changed its name. The early mystics of the Church saw this symbol not as heresy, but as revelation. They spoke of the soul's circular journey, the descent into matter, the suffering of separation, and the return to divine union. This was the same cycle the serpent had traced since Egypt, but now it was reinterpreted as the human spirit's pilgrimage through sin and redemption. Ouroboros became the cross turned inward, the eternal rotation of birth, death, and resurrection. Philosophers of Alexandria, where East met West, carried this synthesis further. They wove Greek metaphysics with Egyptian mysticism, producing a worldview in which every motion of the universe was cyclical. They said the cosmos breathes, expanding and contracting, inhaling existence, exhaling eternity. This rhythm was symbolized by the serpent eating its tail, a visual meditation on the universe's heartbeat. You must understand, these were not myths told to the masses. These were equations of spirit, written in the only language capable of holding infinity, symbol. The Neoplatonists, especially Plotinus, saw the Ouroboros as the image of the One, the source from which all emanates and to which all returns. For them, the serpent's circle was the shape of the soul's longing. Every being, they said, is a curve of the One, folding back to itself, seeking reunion. When the serpent completes its circle, the universe achieves harmony. In this philosophy, the Ouroboros is no longer an external emblem. It is the pattern of consciousness itself. In medieval Hermeticism, this idea merged once more with alchemy. The serpent was drawn around the opus magnum, enclosing the symbols of transformation, suns, moons, and crucibles. It represented the eternal process of refinement, the cosmos purifying itself through its own cycles. To the alchemist, time was the Ouroboros's body, and each revolution of the circle brought matter closer to divine perfection. What many don't see is that every mystic, whether Christian, Gnostic, or Hermetic, was trying to explain the same revelation, that existence is a loop of awareness realizing itself. The serpent is not outside of us. It is the shape of our becoming. Each lifetime, each thought, each act of love or despair is a scale upon its body, endlessly shedding, endlessly reborn. And thus, even within faiths that feared the serpent's form, its truth persisted. The Ouroboros simply hid beneath new names: grace, resurrection, divine unity. Every prayer that seeks return to source echoes its silent curve. For in the end, all roads of spirit bend back upon themselves, forming the circle that the ancients called eternity. The serpent awoke again during the Renaissance, a time when reason and mysticism danced in secret harmony. In candlelit studies filled with books, sketches, and the scent of ink, the Ouroboros re-emerged not as superstition, but as philosophy disguised in art. You must understand, the thinkers of this age saw no conflict between science and spirit. They believed the cosmos was a divine manuscript written in geometry and symbol. The Ouroboros, ancient and silent, became their signature for the unity of all knowledge, the endless conversation between creation and comprehension. Artists, scientists, and alchemists alike drew the serpent's loop beside their inventions. In the notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci, circular sketches of human anatomy mirrored the serpent's eternal form, life feeding upon itself, cycles repeating in nature's precision. For Leonardo, perfection lay in pattern, and pattern was divine. The Ouroboros was hidden in his spirals, his whirlpools, his maps of blood and air. Each curve whispered the same truth, that every motion in the universe folds back toward its origin, completing a design too vast for reason alone to grasp. In alchemy, the Ouroboros became the living seal of the great work. Renaissance alchemists such as Paracelsus and Flamel saw in it the law of continual renewal, the purification of spirit through endless transformation. They spoke of solve et coagula, dissolve and rejoin, the process by which all things die, only to be reborn in a higher form. The serpent devouring itself symbolized this eternal chemistry of the soul. What many don't see is that alchemy was never about gold. It was about divinity refined through experience, the human spirit tempered by the fires of time. Hermetic scholars revived the ancient texts of Egypt and Greece, reading them as codes of cosmic mechanics. They found the Ouroboros inscribed in the margins of manuscripts, like the Chrysopoeia of Cleopatra, drawn as a serpent surrounding the words, "One is all." To them, this was not art, it was revelation. The universe, they believed, is a living circle in which every atom contains the reflection of every other. The alchemist's task was to recognize this unity within himself, for to know the circle is to step beyond it. The scientific revolution that followed did not destroy this vision. It translated it. When astronomers like Copernicus and Kepler mapped the heavens, they traced cosmic orbits that mirrored the serpent's endless curve. The planets circled the sun as the serpent circles its tail. Even Newton, seeking the mechanics of gravity, was unknowingly describing the same eternal motion, the fall and return of all matter. The language had changed, but the law had not. You must understand, science and symbol are not enemies. They are two dialects of the same truth. Philosophers of the Enlightenment began to see the Ouroboros as a metaphor for reason itself. They saw thought turning inward, questioning its own foundation, consuming its own premises to give birth to deeper knowledge. The serpent became an emblem of self-awareness, the intellect biting its own tail to understand consciousness. It is no coincidence that this age, obsessed with discovery, also rediscovered the most ancient truth, that knowledge and mystery are one circle, forever revolving. In secret societies of the time, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, and the Hermetic orders, the Ouroboros adorned seals and manuscripts. It was drawn on initiation documents, symbolizing rebirth into wisdom. Those who entered their ranks were told, to begin the path, you must end what you think you are. The serpent's circle was not decoration, it was doctrine. The initiate was to become like the Ouroboros, reborn through understanding, devouring ignorance to nourish illumination. The Renaissance painters and mystics depicted it encircling globes, suns, and divine faces, its scales glimmering in gold leaf. Each brushstroke carried the message that eternity is not a distant realm, but the hidden geometry of the present moment. What many don't see is that art was their theology. By painting the serpent, they were painting time itself, boundless, self-feeding, alive. Through the centuries, the Ouroboros remained humanity's silent companion, coiling within every discovery, shadowing every enlightenment. Even as religion fragmented and science rose, the serpent endured, its circle whispering through every compass and telescope, reminding humankind that knowledge is a loop returning always to wonder. The philosophers concluded that life itself is the Ouroboros, the mind awakening through cycles of ignorance and illumination, civilizations rising and falling, yet the essence unchanged. For in every beginning, the serpent still waits, ready to consume and recreate the dream anew. By the dawn of the modern age, the Ouroboros had shed its final mythic skin and slithered quietly into the human mind. No longer carved in stone or drawn on parchment, it began to live as metaphor, an invisible idea looping through philosophy, psychology, and science alike. You must understand, when myths vanish from temples, they do not die. They migrate inward. The modern man became both priest and serpent, circling within the chambers of his own consciousness, rediscovering ancient truths through the language of thought. In the field of philosophy, the Ouroboros returned through the questions of being and becoming. Thinkers like Hegel spoke of the dialectic, the process in which every idea contains its own contradiction and by consuming it, gives birth to a higher truth. This is the serpent of logic devouring its tail, endlessly transcending itself. Nietzsche too saw it, the eternal recurrence of all things. He warned that life itself is circular, that every joy and pain will return infinitely. Yet to affirm this eternal loop, he said, is to achieve liberation, to say yes to existence in its entirety, to become the Ouroboros of will. Science, in its pursuit of order, unknowingly rediscovered the serpent's form in the language of physics. The conservation of energy, the law that nothing is created or destroyed, only transformed, is the same truth the ancients carved upon temple walls. Modern cosmology speaks of a cyclical universe, expansion, collapse, and rebirth. Each epoch devours the last to seed the next. What many don't see is that when physicists describe entropy and renewal, they are echoing the same pattern the serpent traced thousands of years ago. In psychology, the Ouroboros took on flesh once more through the work of Carl Jung. He saw it not as myth, but as symbol of the self's eternal process of individuation. Jung wrote that the Ouroboros represents the integration and assimilation of the opposite, the psyche eating its shadow to become whole. Dreams of serpents, he said, mark the mind's return to unity, the reconciliation of the conscious and unconscious. You must understand, Jung's psychology was not invention, but rediscovery. He found the ancient serpent coiled within the human soul, devouring its fears to restore its balance. Even modern biology mirrors this principle. In the double helix of DNA, two serpentine strands coil endlessly around each other, exchanging information, devouring and reproducing themselves. Life, at its most microscopic level, repeats the serpent's gesture. Creation sustained by replication, death absorbed into rebirth. The Ouroboros is not mythic, it is molecular. The pattern of eternity is written in the code of living matter. Artists and poets, too, rediscovered the serpent without knowing its name. William Blake painted circular fires and called them the binding of infinite. T.S. Eliot wrote, "In my end is my beginning." Philosophers of time and consciousness, from Bergson to Heidegger, spoke of life as a self-referential movement, a becoming that eternally returns to its source. What many don't see is that beneath every modern metaphor of evolution, there sleeps the old serpent's logic, progress as return, discovery as remembrance. In modern spiritual thought, the Ouroboros found a new altar in the language of energy and awareness. The Eastern concept of Kundalini, the coiled serpent rising through the spine, mirrors the same cyclical ascent. As it rises, it consumes ignorance and releases light. In the West, mystics of the New Age reimagine this process as the awakening of higher consciousness, an infinite loop of learning and unlearning. Whether described as energy, psyche, or cosmos, the movement remains the same, the circle feeding itself toward awakening. You must understand, the serpent has never belonged to any religion or era. It belongs to existence itself. The scientist finds it in atoms, the philosopher in thought, the psychologist in dreams. The same circle draws itself in all disciplines because it is the shape of reality. The Ouroboros is the unconscious law of being, the pulse that turns stars and cells alike. As the modern world moves faster, seeking progress without reflection, the serpent waits at the edge of awareness, reminding us that forward is an illusion. There is only return, only transformation. What begins must end, and what ends must begin again. Humanity, in its pursuit of mastery, is merely the serpent discovering its own tail once more, fascinated, terrified, and eternally hungry to understand. Thus, even in the age of technology and light, the ancient serpent coils invisibly beneath our logic. It has traded its scales for circuits, its temples for thought, yet it whispers the same warning it gave to the first mystics. Knowledge without reflection devours itself. The circle remains unbroken, and we, its children, remain within it. In the modern age, the Ouroboros no longer coils upon parchment or temple stone. It coils within us. Humanity has become both the serpent and the circle, devourer and devoured. What once symbolized the universe now describes the self. You must understand, this is not a fall from the sacred, but its fulfillment. The external myth has turned inward, and the human soul has inherited the serpent's hunger to know itself completely, even if that knowledge consumes it. Psychologically, the Ouroboros reveals itself whenever the mind confronts its own reflection. Each emotion swallowed and re-understood becomes part of the self's greater whole. Jung called this process individuation, but in truth, it is the serpent's same eternal meal, the devouring of illusion to nourish awareness. When we face fear, shame, or grief, we enact the Ouroboros unconsciously. We allow destruction to become creation. What many don't see is that personal growth follows the same cosmic pattern: rebirth through digestion of the past. Modern spiritual thought continues this ancient rhythm under new names. In mindfulness, the observer and the observed merge. In energy work, light rises through coiled channels, consuming ignorance as fire consumes darkness. Every meditation circle, every ritual of release, reenacts the serpent's curve. The mind bites its tail, returning to presence, discovering that wholeness was never beyond reach. It was always turning within. The Ouroboros, in this sense, has become the anatomy of enlightenment. In the language of psychology, we see the serpent's motion in feedback loops, the systems by which thought creates emotion, emotion shapes perception, and perception recreates thought. Humanity lives inside this Ouroboric mind, an infinite circuit of meaning, feeding upon meaning. You must understand, our technology only mirrors this same motion. The internet, with its endless self-replication, its data feeding on data, is a digital Ouroboros, a collective mind consuming its own reflection. Culturally, the serpent's image surfaces in art, cinema, and literature as the haunting reminder of cycles we cannot escape. Time loops, rebirths, self-reference, all are modern echoes of the ancient circle. From stories of reincarnation to science fiction, paradoxes of time travel, humanity retells the same myth again and again, that endings are beginnings wearing a different mask. The Ouroboros has become the structure of storytelling itself, the loop of conflict, transformation, and return. Spiritually, the serpent whispers through moments of awakening. Those who touch stillness often describe it as circular, a sensation of collapsing and expanding simultaneously. Mystics of every tradition recount visions of spirals of light or coiling energy devouring thought until only awareness remains. What many don't see is that enlightenment is not a straight path upward. It is a spiral inward. The soul circles itself until it remembers its source. In this era of material progress, humanity stands at the edge of its own tail once again. Our discoveries of energy, DNA, and consciousness have brought us face to face with the same question that haunted the ancients. What sustains the circle? We have learned to manipulate creation, but not to comprehend it. The Ouroboros teaches that mastery without humility leads to consumption. Civilizations like serpents can eat themselves when they forget that destruction is sacred only when it births renewal. Psychologically, this symbol now represents integration. The ego, devouring the shadow. The intellect, confronting mystery. To be whole is to eat the fragment, to dissolve duality within awareness. The modern seeker may not pray to serpents, but every act of healing, forgiveness, and understanding repeats the same gesture, the circle of transformation. You must understand, the Ouroboros has become the silent scripture of human evolution. It defines the curve of consciousness itself, the continual folding of self upon self, generation upon generation, thought upon thought. It is the pulse of growth disguised as return. And even as humanity believes it moves forward, it is only tracing the same eternal loop, the universe remembering itself through us. The serpent no longer guards tombs or gods, it guards the mirror. Every time we look inward and see both creation and destruction staring back, we witness its truth, that the end is never the enemy of the beginning, it is its reflection. In the language of modern science, the Ouroboros has found new form. It hides in equations, in spirals of galaxies, in the very structure of matter. You must understand, what the ancients intuited through symbol, we now describe through mathematics. Yet the essence remains unchanged. The serpent still eats its tail, only now we call it feedback, recursion, or the conservation of energy. Science has merely traded mythic ink for numbers, but it continues to write the same story of eternal return. At the edge of physics, cosmologists speak of a cyclic universe, a cosmos that expands, cools, collapses, and ignites again. Each Big Bang devours the corpse of the universe before it. This is the serpent's breath on a cosmic scale, the same devouring motion traced in the temples of Ra and the scrolls of the Hermetists. The universe itself is the Ouroboros, inhaling and exhaling eternity. What many don't see is that science, in describing this endless renewal, has rediscovered the serpent's geometry beneath the stars. In quantum mechanics, the Ouroboros hides in paradox. The observer and the observed create one another, each feeding on the other's existence. Every particle defines itself through its reflection. The tail exists because the mouth perceives it. The mouth exists because it bites. You must understand, this is the same revelation expressed by the mystics, that consciousness is self-sustaining, that reality exists through awareness of itself. The serpent is the experiment, the result, and the scientist all at once. Even the structure of matter echoes this circular law. Electrons orbit nuclei, planets orbit stars, galaxies orbit unseen centers, and time itself bends back upon gravity's will. The serpent is the invisible mathematician, drawing circles around all creation. It devours linearity. It mocks straight lines. Every force, every motion, eventually curves. The Ouroboros lives in curvature, the universe's signature of balance. In the study of entropy, physicists describe the slow decay of order into chaos. Yet even here, the serpent waits. For entropy gives rise to life's creativity, order born anew from disorder's ashes. Destruction and creation are not opposites, but continuations. Energy never disappears, it only changes face. This was the first lesson of alchemy, the same whispered truth behind the serpent's tail. Nothing dies, it transforms. Biology too sings this rhythm. Cells divide, consume, and regenerate. Ecosystems recycle death into nourishment. Even the carbon atoms that form our bodies were once forged in dying stars. We are the serpent's flesh, devouring and reborn, eternally composed of the universe's remnants. What many don't see is that the Ouroboros is not mythology about creation. It is creation's own biography, written in blood and starlight. Modern information theory and cybernetics have also rediscovered the serpent through recursion and self-reference. Systems that feed upon their own output, adapting through feedback, mirror the Ouroboros's loop perfectly. Artificial intelligence, too, learns by devouring data of its own creation, reshaping itself through endless reflection. Humanity, in building machines that think, has given technology the serpent's breath, an infinite appetite for self-understanding. Philosophers of time now question whether linear chronology ever existed. Some suggest time is a closed curve, each moment feeding the next, while returning to the origin. Others claim the universe repeats infinitely, each cycle slightly altered. These theories echo the oldest vision of all, that the cosmos itself is a serpent, whose every breath is an age, whose every age is a heartbeat of eternity. You must understand, the Ouroboros is not superstition hidden beneath science. It is science revealed through symbolism. The serpent's law of renewal, destruction, and unity governs everything, from quantum collapse to cosmic birth. When Newton, Einstein, and Hawking described the universe bending upon itself, they were only translating into reason what mystics once carved in gold. The circle devours itself to remain whole. And now, as humanity peers deeper into the atom and farther into the galaxies, it finds the same familiar shape, an endless loop of origin and return. The serpent looks back from the void, smiling through equations and telescopes alike, whispering across the centuries that there has never been a beginning, nor will there ever be an end. There is only the breath between them. From the sands of Egypt to the stars of the modern cosmos, the Ouroboros has never ceased to turn. It has slithered across time, shedding skins of myth and science, leaving behind the same truth in every age. Existence is a circle. You must understand, this is not a symbol of fate, nor of confinement, but of participation. To live within the circle is to share the serpent's secret, to know that every birth carries death within it, and every ending hides the seed of awakening. The universe does not move forward, it moves inward, folding endlessly into its own mystery. Humanity has tried to name that mystery, Ra, Logos, Tao, God, but the serpent remains nameless because it is all names. It is the pulse behind the many faces of creation, the quiet geometry linking dust and divinity. In its eternal rotation, it binds matter to meaning, chaos to consciousness. The ancients worshipped it as a god, philosophers reasoned it as a principle, and scientists now chart it as a law. But the serpent has only ever been saying one thing: you are inside me, and I am inside you. The Ouroboros teaches that to destroy is to create, to consume is to become. Its motion is the rhythm of forgiveness, the proof that even darkness serves the light it hides. You must understand, it devours itself not out of hunger, but out of love, the love of wholeness, the desire to remain one. Every act of dissolution, every heartbreak, every loss is but the serpent closing its circle, reminding us that nothing ever leaves the pattern. It merely changes its form. In the mirror of the Ouroboros, humanity sees its reflection. Civilizations rising and collapsing, empires devouring themselves in pursuit of eternity. Yet the pattern continues, unbroken. The serpent sleeps within every ruin, waiting for consciousness to rise again, whispering, "There are no ruins, only beginnings, wearing the mask of memory." What many don't see is that history itself is Ouroboric, the same lessons looping until they are understood, until the collective mind remembers that all wars, all creations, all faiths are reflections of one eternal motion. Philosophers call it unity, mystics call it oneness, scientists call it equilibrium. The name is irrelevant, the circle is eternal. Within that circle, existence endlessly recreates itself. Life feeds on death, thought feeds on doubt, love feeds on loss. This is not tragedy, it is balance. The serpent ensures that no part of the universe escapes the cycle of transformation. It is the great teacher of impermanence and continuity, the proof that the divine is not static perfection, but infinite renewal. In the deepest sense, the Ouroboros is not out there, it is here, coiled in the center of consciousness. Every time the mind reflects upon itself, it reenacts creation's original gesture. Awareness devouring ignorance, light consuming shadow. Enlightenment is not escape from the circle, it is the realization that you were the circle all along. You must understand, immortality was never about living forever. It was about realizing you never stopped living. Look closely at the world around you, the galaxies that spiral in silence, the blood that loops through your veins, the thought that returns in dreams. Every motion repeats, every pattern closes upon itself. The serpent lives in all cycles, reminding us that existence is a conversation between being and becoming. There is no straight path, only the circle of realization, always returning, always reborn. So when the ancients drew the Ouroboros on their temples, they were not predicting eternity. They were describing it. They saw what science and spirit still pursue, the endless reflection of reality upon itself. The serpent does not promise peace. It promises participation, the eternal dance between destruction and renewal. And to see that dance clearly is to awaken, to understand that life is not a story with an ending, but an ever-turning verse of infinite creation. And perhaps in the silence between one breath and the next, you can feel it, the subtle curve of existence turning inward, the ancient serpent coiling softly around the moment you call now. In that circle lies the secret of all beginnings, the memory of all endings, and the still point where they become one.